All right, we're going to be coming. All right, we're going to be covering the grammar and vocabulary section for practice SAT 4. All right. Welcome everyone who's watching the live stream. This is going to be covering practice SAT 4, specifically the vocabulary and the grammar section. So can you solve this tough SAT vocabulary problem? All right. Can you solve this tough SAT problem? So in vocabulary problems, what I like to do is I take a look at the blank and then I like to predict what goes in the blank, because what you want to do is compare that prediction to the answer choices. This helps you get rid of some bad answers, especially for the hard section. So let me go ahead and read this. In studying the use of external stimuli to reduce the itching sensation caused by an allergic histamine response, Louise Ward and colleagues found that while harmless applications of vibration or warming can provide a temporary distraction, such blank stimuli offer less relief than a stimulus that seems less benign, like a mild electric shock. All right, so to make my prediction, what I want to do is look at strong words, so words with large tone or change the meaning about an idea, and transitions. So I'm going to take a look back into the text for those. So right before the blank, I see such. Such is a for example transition. That means whatever's coming into my blank is going to be an example of an idea that came prior. So I'm going to look for that idea. So we're talking about stimuli here. So Louise and Ward colleagues found that while harmless application of vibration can provide temporary distraction, such blank stimuli. So I see this strong word here of harmless. So I know whatever description is going to come before the blank, it's going to relate to harmless. So I'm going to just probably use harmless again. Like, I can use the same word twice, can't I? So I'm going to say harmless. That's my prediction. In addition, I mean, this is a little advanced. I see that benign is used here, and most students don't know what benign means, but that also means harmless. So this is also a main idea. This is an idea that's been repeated throughout. So harmless is going to be my prediction. Let me compare that to the answer choices. All right, taking a look at the answer choices, I see A is deceptive. Was this a deceptive stimuli? Does that relate to harmless at all? No, it's not going to be A. Innocuous? Well, as of now, I don't really know what innocuous means. So I'm going to leave that one there. I don't get rid of words I don't know. This is a habit a lot of students have. Don't do it. If you don't know what a word means, just leave it for now. Novel? Was it a novel or new stimuli? Probably not. And then impractical. Did this stimuli get in my way? Was it impractical? No. So I'm left with B, innocuous. And so innocuous does mean harmless, but for most students, they don't know what innocuous or benign means. So a lot of the times with hard vocabulary questions, you want to do process of elimination to get the correct answer. So let's move on. Oops, let me erase all that. All right, looking at another vocab problem. Where are my answer choices? There we go. Let me zoom in there. So this is another vocabulary problem. So I'm going to do the same strategy, predict what goes in the blank, and look for strong answer choices. Strong words and transitions. My thing going crazy right now. Let me check it. Can I fix it? Will it fix itself? It fixed itself. How amazing. All right, let's do this. New and interesting research conducted by Suleiman Al-Sweden and Moath Al-Hajj is inspired by their observation that though there have been many studies of the effect of high altitude on blood chemistry, there is a blank studies of the effect of blood chemistry on living in locations below sea level, such as California towns of Salton City and Sealy. So taking a look at this, I see that there's a strong transition here that's hidden away at the top. So it's inspired by their observation that though there have been many. So though is a transition. It's specifically a comparison. I'm going to be comparing two ideas here, and this is very important for vocabulary questions. That though there have been many studies, so many is a strong word, it changes my idea or perception about these studies, that there are a lot of them. Studies on the effect of high altitude, comma, there is a blank studies of the effect of blood chemistry living at locations below sea level. So let's think about this. There's a comparison we're talking about many studies at high altitude, there are probably a low amount of studies about low altitude because this is a comparison, though it's a disagreeing word like however or but. That means if there's many of this, but there's a low amount of that. So low or lack of is probably going to be my prediction for this. So let me take a look at the answer choices and see if I can get rid of any wrong answers. So let me erase that real quick and then scroll down. All right, so we're going to be looking for something like low or lack of. All right, let's take a look. Quarrel about. Um, Quarrel about. So let's assume I don't know what quarrel means. Let me scroll up. Would it make sense that there is a quarrel about studies of effective blood chemistry? Does that even sound right? No. But even then, quarrel means like an argument or a fight. Was there a fight about studies of low altitude? No, it makes no sense. So, quarrel is totally wrong. But what's super important about this question, guys, that you need to pay attention to is whenever you have a vocab question and you see about, of, in, you see paucity of, profusion of, verisimilitude in, that's a clue. Even if you don't know what verisimilitude is, you can use in to help you with vocab problems. So let's take a look at B, a paucity of. There was a paucity of studies on the effect of low altitude. I don't know what paucity means. Not even gonna lie. It sounds like pause the TV, but that's not good enough for the SAT. So I'll leave it. If I don't know what a word means, I leave it. Don't get rid of it. A profusion of studies. All right, I don't know what profusion means either, but what you can do for hard vocab is let's break it down by prefix and suffix. So pro means like up, right? Profusion probably is the opposite of low or lack. It's probably more, like pro. That's my guess. That's probably why I'm actually not going to choose C. It's profusion. I know fusion's to tie together, but that doesn't seem like low or lack of. So I'm not going to choose C for those reasons. And then I'm choosing between B and D. I really don't know what verisimilitude means, but it does end with in. So are we talking about the studies or something in the studies? Let's take a look. There have been many studies of the effect of high altitude. So there is a lack probably of studies. Does that make sense? They use many of studies. So profusion of studies is probably the correct answer for this question because of at the end. So a lot of the times you don't need to memorize endless vocab. Use those transitions, use those strong words, break it down prefix, suffix, and then notice when it says of versus in versus about and choose the best answer. So B is the correct answer for this question. Let's take a look at another hard vocabulary. All right, try to pick my answer choices again. Haha. All right, you guys solved this hard SAT vocab problem. Let's take a look. So remember, look at strong words, look at transition, and predict your answer. Blank. All right. Whether the reign of the French monarchs such as King Capet or Henry I was historically much more relatively history was shaped by questions of legitimacy and therefore cannot be understood without a corollary understanding of the factors that allow the monarch to blank to the right. Um, and I'm probably going to bring in outside knowledge here, which I highly recommend, but you know, whenever I see a king in his right to the throne, it's probably that. Let me see if I can find evidence for that. Because that's just what my intuition's telling me. Whether the reign of its trajectory was shaped by questions of legitimacy, and therefore not corollary. So corollary, if us going to get correlation, something happening at the same time or needed to happen as well. Understanding of factors that allowed the monarch to, and I'm going to put hold his right to the throne because just my stomach's telling me that's my prediction. I'm not really super sure I know what corollary means, but I do know that if they're questioning whether he should hold his throne, and that there's a corollary meaning at the same time or opposite, understanding that he did in fact hold the right to his throne. So I'm gonna say like keep is my prediction. Hold. It's kind of probably what I'm gonna be going with. There's not many strong words here or any words with strong tones. So we're gonna say keep. Keep, hold. All right. So first off, let's take a look at A. Does that compare to keep or hold? No, to disengage. I mean, I know in spy movies, like disengage, disengage, like quit the mission. But that also means they'll probably like give up. Like, do you really think the king is going to disengage his right to hold the throne? Heck no. To annotate. So, do you think he got a pen and pencil and wrote about his right to hold the throne? Nope, not close to my prediction. So, I'm going to definitely get rid of B. All right, so C, buttress. Don't know what it means, we're going to skip it for now because remember, if you don't know what a word means, keep it. It might be the right answer. And reciprocate. So to reciprocate is like to share. Like you reciprocate feelings with someone, you share the feelings, you understand. Do you think a king would want to share his right to hold the throne to reciprocate? Heck no. So it's simply not going to be D. So once again, this is a fantastic example of process of elimination is the best route for hard vocabulary problems because how you solve these is not by memorizing thousands and thousands of vocab problems. It's words in context. What helps you is to understand the context. So C is the correct answer for this question. And BT dubs. Thank you, AP Art History I took a while ago. Buttresses are pillars on a fort. That's how I know what that word means. It is something about forts and it's a big wall. All right, let's see. Do we have one more? Yes, we do. Let me see. Can I get my computer to work correctly? No, I can't. Let's try it one more time. 1, 2, and 3. Why? Oh, why? Ah ha ha. There we go. Fourth time's the charm. All right, let's take a look. Remember, look for tone, strong words, words that influence your ideas about something, and look for transitions. All right, I'll give you guys a second. I'm going to check my phone. Cool. Apparently, my Wi Fi was messed up. Might be. We're just going to have to ignore it for now because this is the last vocab until we do grammar. So take a second. Can you guys solve this tough SAT vocab problem? Let's take a look. Research of Ha-Sung Jung led a 2020 study showing that individual acts of kindness can blank pro-social behavior across a larger group. Jung and her team found out that bystanders who witness a helpful act are more likely to offer help to someone else, and in doing so can inspire others to act. Okay, cool. So I don't have enough, at least on this first sentence, to make an accurate prediction, but looking at the rest, Jung and her team found that bystanders who witness helpful act become more likely. That's a strong word. That changes my opinion about something. It is more likely to happen. And offer help to someone else, and in doing so, inspire others to act. So I'm just going to say support, cause. Sounds like individual acts of kindness or witness a helpful act more likely to help someone else. So it causes pro-social behavior. That's my prediction. So not a lot of transitions, but definitely a lot of strong words. Inspire, helpful, more likely, kindness, strong words, tons of tone, mucho positive. So cause is going to be my prediction. And so let me scroll down and take a look at these. So which one is most similar to cause? No, where's my pen? Cause. All right, require. I mean, we can leave that, but I don't think acts of kindness require acts of kindness or pro-social. Like acts of kindness require pro-social behavior. Is that a bit weird? I don't know. I'm not liking it, but I'm not going to dump it just yet. Well, I know. Does pro-social behavior acts of kindness can remember pro-social behavior? That's not similar to cause at all. I know it's not going to be B. And then foster, do acts of kindness foster pro-social behavior? Probably. That sounds pretty good. Cause to foster. Foster means to like Foster's House of Imaginary Friends. No, foster means to like create, to help support and grow. So that's very similar to cause. And so with foster, I'm going to dump A because I don't like it anymore. Require is definitely too strong. Require implies that there's no other option. There totally is. That's why it's significant. And then discourage. So it's great when you see two opposites. So foster and discourage are probably two completely opposite words to each other. And whenever you see two opposite words, one of them's probably the right answer because that's just how they write it. So, like, if you misinterpreted that passage, you might choose D. And D is definitely wrong because it's the opposite of cause to discourage something. So, C is going to be the correct answer for this. Foster. All right, let me take a second. I'm going to check my phone. All right, so I'm going to start going ahead. I'm going to skip ahead to the grammar section. So, we're just going to cover SAT grammar. How do I get to grammar from here? Let's see. Click, 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 click. Grammar starts around, question 15. Oh, is this grammar? Yes, it is. Aha, we got it to work the first time. Very nice. Is this grammar? Let me see. This is grammar. Boom, bam, boom. All right, we got it to work. Very nice. Okay, so strategy for grammar. For all grammar questions, what you want to do is once you realize you're in the grammar section is take a look at the answer choices. Depending on what's changing between the answer choices, that's going to be the topic tested. And so once you realize that, you'll know what to do. And I'll walk you through it, so don't sweat it. So take a look at this one. Look at the answer choices. Do you guys recognize this type of question? I call these questions clause, transition, clause questions. And the reason is because it's not only testing what separates clauses, so independent clauses, dependent clauses, or full sentences with fragments. You also need to know where does the transition go for these. So you can often see that punctuation's changing. That's what tells you it's a clause question. So you see comma, comma, no punctuation, comma, semicolon, comma, comma, semicolon. Easy to recognize, and then you know they're clause, transition, clause because there's a word and then a disagreeing transition. So it's rather, but usually it's rather, though, however, etc. So let's go ahead. And when you realize it's testing clauses, you want to go ahead and look at the clause before the punctuation and the clause after the punctuation. To humans, it does not appear that the golden orb weaver spider uses camouflage to capture its prey, because prey is occurring before the punctuation. To humans, it does not appear. That's a full sentence. I'm going to say that's an independent clause because independent clauses are full sentences. Then let's take a look at the other one. The brightly colored arachnid seems to wait conspicuously in the center of its large circular web for insects to approach. That's a full sentence. Since I know we are separating two full sentences, a comma cannot separate two full sentences. So I know that answer choices A and I know answer choice B are incorrect. And so what I need to do is say, well, which side does the rather go on? Does it go with the first clause or the second clause? Well, it depends. So depending on whether the disagreeing transition goes with the sentence that disagrees with the sentence directly before it. So if it was going with C, it would be a part of the first clause because it's before the semicolon. That means that first sentence disagrees with the sentence directly before it. If D were the correct answer, that means that the second clause disagrees with the one right before it because rather occurs after the semicolon. So let's take a look. To humans, it does not appear that the golden orb weaver spider uses camouflage to capture its prey. The brightly colored arachnid seems to wait conspicuously at the center of its large web for insects to approach. All right, perfect. So I would say rather, it's going to be D. It's going to be D because can the first sentence even disagree with the sentence before it? No. Because there is no sentence before it. So D has to be the correct answer. Otherwise, you wouldn't put a rather on a sentence that literally can't disagree with anything else. Makes no sense. And we know A and B are wrong because commas can't separate two full sentences. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Let's take a look at the next one. All right. Can you guys solve this verb SAT question? Actually, I can solve this SAT verb question without reading the passage. Here's why. Whenever you see verbs are changing in the answer choices, you want to do something called the it-they test. So the it-they test is when you put it and they before each answer choice. And if you get an odd one out, that's the correct answer. So if I put it in front of a verb, it studies, and it makes sense, that means that this verb is singular. And if I put it in front of it has been studying, well, doesn't that work? Singular as well. I can look at it will study, singular, and it was studying, singular. And then you can do they studies, doesn't make sense. They has been studying, they will study. Uh-oh. So whenever you see a verb that works for both, it's actually not gonna solve. It's a tense question, so you're gonna have to read the passage. And then they was studying. But since it and they both work with will study, that actually tells me it's a tense question. And so whenever you realize you're testing a tense question, you want to go back into the passage and take a look at each verb used in the passage and kind of determine is it past, present, or future tense, and then pick the correct verb that matches. So let's take a look. Bonnie Buriati of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory blank data about Saturn's rings collected by Cassini spacecraft when she made an interesting discovery. All right. So let's take a look. Let's look at the other verbs. Was blank data about Saturn's rings collected, so past, when she made it an interesting discovery, which is past tense. But she was doing something when she made that discovery. So it probably is going to be, let's see which one sounds the best. It's probably going to be was studying because that's past as well. So all of this was past tense, collected, made. So it's probably Bunny Buriati of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was studying data about Saturn's rings collected by the Cassini spacecraft. So it makes the most sense that D is going to be the correct answer because all the other verbs are past tense and it sounds the best versus laboratory studies data, has been studying data, will study. Nah, it's probably was studying. All right, let's move on. All right, perfect. Cool. So let's take a look at the answer choices and see what's changing. All right. Take a second. Can you guys solve this tough grammar SAT problem? For every SAT problem, I take a look at the answer choices and to look what's changing. In this one, I can see and, a period, comma, and no punctuation. So whenever I see punctuation between the answer choices, I know it's testing clauses. And whenever it's testing clauses, you want to take a look at the clause before the punctuation and after the punctuation and determine, are they full sentences or are they fragments? And that'll tell you what punctuation to use. So I know bay is before the punctuation, so it's going to go with the first clause, and having is after the punctuation, so I know it's going to go with the second clause. Let's take a look at the passage. On July 23rd, 1854, a clipper ship called the Flying Cloud entered San Francisco Bay. Tell me, is that a full sentence? Yeah. It tells me that this ship entered San Francisco Bay. That's an independent clause. Let's look at the second clause. Having left New York Harbor under the guidance of Captain Jose Perkins Creasy and his wife, navigator Eleanor Creasy, a mere 89 days and 8 hours earlier, the celebrated ship set a record that would stand for 135 years. This is also a full sentence because, I mean, they're trying to trick you by saying, having left New York Harbor, but celebrated makes it a full sentence because that's the main verb. So it's separating two full sentences. So let's think, what can separate two full sentences? Well, I know and can't And is a fanboy, but fanboys need commas before them to separate two full sentences. So A is incorrect. I know a period can separate two full sentences or two independent clauses, so B is good to go. Then I know C, a comma cannot separate two full sentences. That's a comma splice, and we don't like those. And then D, no punctuation at all. Well, you definitely need punctuation to separate two full sentences. So D is going to be incorrect, and B is going to be the correct answer for this question. All right, let's fix it up. Womp, 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 womp. Hey, there we go. All right, fifth time's the charm. All right. Can you guys solve this tough SAT grammar question? All right, let's take a look. So I'm going to take a look at the answer choices to see what's changing to determine what topic is this testing. So taking a look at the answers, I see that verbs are changing in the answer choices. So whenever I see verbs changing in the answer choices, I immediately am going to do the it, they test to see if it's testing subject-verb agreement or if it's testing tense. Let's try it. It has enhanced. So since has works with it, that means it's a singular verb. It are enhancing? Well, that sounds weird. It sounds better with they are enhancing. So I know this is plural. It have enhanced or they have enhanced. This is plural again. It enhance or they enhance. Oop, what did I do? Perfect. It's they enhance, which means this is plural as well. And since we have one singular verb and three plural ones, I know that A is going to be the correct answer for this question. All right, let's take a look at the answer choices. Let's see. Can y'all solve this tough SAT problem? Taking a look at the answer choices, I can see that A has a period, B has a comma, and no punctuation. So when I see punctuation changing in the answer choices, I know that this is testing clauses. And when it's testing clauses, I want to take a look at the clause before the punctuation and the clause after the punctuation, determine are they full sentences or not, and then choose the punctuation that matches. So let's take a look. And I know Tombs is going to go with the first clause because it's before the punctuation, and built is going to come after. Archaeologists name it recently traveled to Hegra to study its ancient tombs. So I can tell that this is an independent clause. It's a full sentence. Built into the rocky outcrops of a vast desert, these burial chambers seem to blend seamlessly with nature. That is also a full sentence, two independent clauses. So let's look at the answers. Which ones can separate two independent clauses? Well, I know a period can separate two independent clauses. A comma cannot separate two independent clauses. That's what a comma splice is. And then C, and is a fanboy, but fanboys without commas before them cannot separate two full sentences. And I know no punctuation definitely cannot separate two full sentences. That's a run-on sentence. So A is going to be the correct answer for this question. Let's take a look. All right, here I see different types of punctuation changing. So you see a comma, 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 no punctuation, and then comma, comma. So whenever you see a whole bunch of commas moving around and surrounding different pieces of a sentence or answer choice, this is testing unnecessary or necessary information. And so when pieces of a sentence are surrounded by punctuation, whether it be two commas, two dashes, or two parentheses, it's telling you that this information is unnecessary for the sentence to function. And so what you want to do is go back into the passage, take a look, read the passage without that information. Does it make sense? Does the meaning of the passage change? Because if the meaning of the passage changes or it stops making sense, that tells you that information is necessary. And if information is necessary, you don't put punctuation around it. But if the meaning or function doesn't change, means it's unnecessary and you need punctuation surrounding it. So that's how you tell what the correct answer is or not. So let's take a look. In 1937, Chinese American screen actor Anna May Wong, who had portrayed numerous villains and secondary characters but never a heroine, finally got a starring role in Paramount Pictures' Daughter of Shanghai, a film that critic Stina Chine claims expanded the range of possibilities for Asian images on screen. All right. So if I just said a film that critic claims, what critic? What critic claims? Cynthia Chin, that's an important part of the sentence. I need to know who you're talking about. You can't just say critic. Who's the critic? And so every answer choice with Cynthia Chin surrounded by punctuation is declaring Cynthia Chin as non essential, which in this case, it is essential. So I know A is wrong, B is wrong, and C and D could be correct, but let's double check, is it going to be C or D? So let's take a look back in the passage. A film that critic Cynthia claims expanded the range of possibilities. Okay, perfect. So if I see a clause offsetting a piece of the passage, that means it's also claiming that part of the passage is not essential. Well, actually, hold on. I'm a dingus. I can see that there's 2 commas around claims. I feel like claims is an important verb. Also, super weird to do. Put 2 commas around a verb that critic Stina Chin claims. You wouldn't do that. The verb is necessary to introduce that quotation at the end. So C is going to be the correct answer for this question. What a dingus. I can't believe I missed that. All right, perfect. Fixed it. All right, let's take a look. This is a good topic. Take a second. Can you guys solve this tough grammar SAT problem? All right, so this one's tough because when I look at the answer choices, I can see 2 pieces of punctuation surrounding both native and non-native. In addition, I see a semicolon here and a comma here. Semicolon here and a comma here, comma, no punctuation. So when you see multiple semicolons changing in the answer choices, it's going to be testing complex lists. And so what complex lists are is that there are lists, but instead of commas separating each item. So if I said to you, I like pizza, ice cream, and hamburgers, there would be a comma between pizza, ice cream, and hamburgers. But during a complex list, you use semicolons as that comma. So each semicolon just indicates the end of an idea presented in a list, one of the 3 ideas. So, and you can guarantee it is testing this. When you go into the passage and you see a semicolon and, it is 100% testing this topic. That's how you know. So let's take a look. Let's see if we can find the pattern. So the Arc Alpine Botanic Garden, Nora and Jardin Botanico Rio de Janeiro are 2 of the many botanical gardens around the world dedicated to growing diverse plant species, both native and non-native, fostering scientific research, and educating the public about plant conservation. So clearly each item is dedicated. Okay, so this actually looks like this is the first item, dedicated to growing diverse plant species, fostering in scientific research, and educating the public about plant conservation. So I know that there should be a semicolon used because remember, there's 3 items in the list, and you need to separate 3 items, 2 semicolons. So we have to use a semicolon because only 1 is in the passage. Therefore, we know that A and we know that D are incorrect because we need to use a semicolon. So between B and C, if both native and non-native come before the semicolon, that means it's going to be a part of the first item in the list. But if both native and non-native come after the semicolon, that means it's going to be a part of the second item in the list. So let's see which one makes most logical sense. Both native and non-native. So around the world dedicated to growing diverse plant species, both native and non-native, or is it both native and non-native fostering scientific research? I think both native and non-native should go with the idea talking about plant species. So therefore, B is going to be the correct answer for this question. All right, let's see. I think this might be the last one. Yep. That is it for today. That is digital SAT 4 hard module reading and writing, vocabulary, and grammar. If you guys want more, you can hit me up in the private chat if you want me to do the transition questions, bullets, if you want to see a charts question. But if no one responds in the next minute, I'll be out of here. Thank you guys. Oh, cool.